as Chris mentioned, we're going to be having a presentation from Cath, as many of you have probably now met during lunch, to talk about the organisation that Cath and John founded. But first, we've got a message from Léa, who's come across just from France to this meeting to speak to us today and tell us a little bit about the project that she's working with. So, over to you.
Thank you very much. First, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart to let me present our project. So my name is Léa Desplanques. I used to be the vice president of the association called IS2F, Ingénieurs Solidaires et Sans Frontières, based in France. We worked with another association based both in France and in Madagascar, and our goal was to build a project to struggle against both poverty and deforestation, to struggle against deforestation. So after a short introduction, I will talk about our tripartite project, which was based in Ambohimanga in the north of Tana. I will then talk about the result of our project, and I will finish by a short conclusion. As we talked about, Madagascar is a victim of deforestation, and a huge forest surface is disappearing each year. It's about 2,000 hectares a year. And the causes are diverse. The creation of agricultural lands, the exploitation of minerals by international companies, the wood constructions, and the firewood exploitation. One rural and typical household consumes 4 tons of a year of wood in order to eat and to heat the food. And one household spends 1/3 of the income to buy charcoal or firewood to eat also. And the consequences are diverse. Among them, there are the loss of habitats for animals, the desertification, and the decrease of cultivar lands, and there are other consequences that we talked about before. Our project was, as I said before, to struggle against both poverty and deforestation. The biggest starvation are more in the south of the island, but we decided to act in the north of Tana because it's becoming more and more difficult there, and before it's getting worse, we decided to act. So we act in Ambohimanga, that is about 21 kilometers northeast of Tana. This project was tripartite because with my association we worked with 2 others. The first one is called Anitrazam. It was the organizing actors. It's an association that is based both in Alsace and in Madagascar. We worked also with another one, ADES. It's the Association pour le développement de l'énergie solaire Suisse Madagascar. It's the implementing actor that is based both in Switzerland and in Madagascar. And that is my association, Ingénieurs Solidaires et Sans Frontières. We were the financial actors, and we also contribute to have this idea of making the project. The project is based on 3 parts. The first part is the formation. ADES gave the formation in different schools and adults because they gave the formation to 70 adults and 160 pupils. It helps them to know how to use them, so cookers and deadwood stoves, and they also inhabitants also could understand why they have to use them, and making some recipes, rice, cakes, and the goal also was to reach the pupils, because it will be easier then to convince their parents to have them, to use them instead of buying wood or cutting trees. Oh, I didn't say that it was a formation of 4 sessions, and each formation lasts 2 hours. The second part of this project is the distribution. 230 people received both one deadwood cooker and one solar oven. So this is a solar oven, this is the deadwood stove, and this is the day of the distribution of both stoves and cookers for each house. And the third and last part of this project is the reforestation. The reforestation has been done in the Mangabe Hill, which is the hill that is overhanging the village. And it used to be a natural forest there. Each person who received both one solar oven and one cooker has to plant 3 trees from their choice on this land. And the growth of the trees is surveyed by people in Ambohimanga from the association. Yes, it's supervised. And the results, so as I said, both were distributed to each house. Both we've chosen to distribute both because the solar ovens can only be used 200 days a year because of the sunshine, and also the high yield stoves because people don't need to cut trees anymore. They only need little branches found off the floor that they can fetch on the forest. Then the sprouts on the floor can also easier grow, and it consumes less CO2. The less CO2 is spread out. Yes, thank you. And also, the savings, because especially in the COVID, it has been proven because people don't have to use their money to buy charcoal or to buy wood. They can use for everything else, just to live a bit better. Then the conclusion, maybe it's a drop in the ocean, but it has been a real success, and it's not finished because 300 people are on the waiting list. Some people that didn't have them were a bit jealous in the COVID because the one who had them were very happy about that. More projects are on the way. For example, the building of a community center, the Malagasy firefighters training, and the tutoring for out-of-school pupils. The association accepts donations, and we are also selling a book about a king that lived in the village, written by Huguette Fugier. So if you are interested in spending money, you can go on this website. Everything is in French, but I've heard that the majority of the audience is very good at understanding French. So, and also a person in this association would like also to translate this book in English. So if there is any volunteer for that, you can write to Anta. She will have a pleasure to to correspond with you. Thank you very much for your attention and misa outra.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that very comprehensive overview of your project, which looks very admirable. So if anyone's got any ideas or wants to donate or help translate or anything, then Léa will be around. So now we welcome Cath to come and give the final presentation of the afternoon.
Go.
Okay, over to you.
Hello everybody, thank you so much. It's a real privilege to come and talk to you a little bit about mine and my husband and my family's last few years in Madagascar and what we've been up to and what's been happening in terms of social care reform that the government is really on the brink of. There's big changes afoot on social care reform, particularly of children and vulnerable children that can't live with their birth family. And this is my family back in our house in Christchurch. We went to Madagascar for 5 years. We came back last year. We had an absolute blast. I don't want you to take away from this talk that we're in any way heroes or anything like that. We just followed a dream. We had a wonderful time in Madagascar, and we had an absolute privilege. It was an absolute privilege to meet the right people at the right time and make connections so that the Malagasy can run with improving their childcare system. So we just have played and are playing a small role in that. But these are my 2 birth children, and this is our little girl Erica, who's Malagasy, I think you can tell. She's been with us since she was 3 months old, and she was at an orphanage and was born with very severe congenital anomalies, birth problems, and she's had about 5 operations so far. We brought her to the UK when she was 3 months old for an emergency operation, and since then she's been to hospital in Cape Town, and she's going to need some more, probably at Great Ormond Street. Now we're back here and we can have it on the NHS now that she's got indefinite leave to remain. She's Erica, she's an absolute joy. So, a little bit about our NGO. We have a UK-based charity, a registered UK charity called FAM International, advocating for supporting and preserving families through the world. And FAMadagascar is our Malagasy charity that's registered with the Malagasy government over there. It's a little bit small, but it says advocating every child's right to a loving family, preserving existing families, and preventing child abandonment. That's a little bit a summary of our NGO. But let me explain a little bit about the journey, what led John and I and my family to move to Madagascar. When we were, I think it was about 20, life just goes by, doesn't it? I don't know, when did we go to Mozambique? 2011. We had supported an orphanage for a number of years, and a large organisation that set up a lot of orphanages, and we had because we were a little bit adventurous, we got an aeroplane and visited this orphanage in Mozambique. And we spent a couple of months there, and what I think really, how can I explain? We came away a little bit disturbed about what we had seen or what we'd been part of. The children were very well educated, they had a lot of food, but I think essentially how we felt when we left was they were all very lonely. It was a very huge home, and there was lots of children, and but they were, each individual child seemed lost and alone, and couldn't quite work out why at the time it didn't sit right. We came back to the UK and we trained as foster carers, my husband and I, and with an organisation called Key Assets, a large independent fostering agency in the UK. We had some excellent training, but the light bulb moment went on when we learnt about a psychological theory called attachment. I don't know if you've heard of it, probably most of you have heard about Bowlby's theory of attachment, that children, particularly under fives, they are born with an innate need to attach to one primary caregiver. It is very critical that they experience one primary caregiver meeting their needs at a very young age. And Bowlby, in the 1950s, he came up with this maternal deprivation hypothesis that suggests that continual disruption of the attachment between infant and primary caregiver can result in long-term cognitive, social, and emotional difficulties for an infant. So, I mean, a simplified version, the more the child feels attached to the mother, the more secure he is in his acceptance of himself and the rest of the world, the more love he gets, the more he's capable of giving, and attachment is as central to the developing child as eating and breathing. And research has found that if a child doesn't experience that attachment at a young age, they don't develop empathy, and often it leads to an adult life in crime, because if you're somebody that is a perpetrator of crime, often you don't experience empathy for the victims of your crime. So attachment is very, 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 very important. And I think we then realised that in the UK, we, as a result of this theory, not long after the 1950s, we closed all our large centres, we closed all our orphanages, and we placed children with families, and we call it foster care. And I think the question for John and I was, why then are we in the West, or why were we personally still supporting large orphanages in the developing world when research suggests children thrive in family, not in large settings with multiple carers? So it was a personal challenge for us. And of course in 2019, this is sort of a big answer to the question that was raised by our own journey. The UN has got together and created the rights of the child. You've probably heard of the UN rights of the child. And in 2019, they got together again. This is an actual photograph from it. And there was a major milestone for globally of the care of children. And it was a resolution where all 193 members agreed for the first time in history that orphanages harm children, and recognising that the vast majority of children in orphanages have living family, 80% with one parent. At least 80% of children in orphanages and centres have one living parent. All children should be reunited with or supported to remain with their families. Where that's not possible, the resolution says that governments should commit to provide high quality, family and community-based alternative care for children. So a big resolution globally, there's a big movement going on globally for countries, particularly in the developing world, to start placing children with Malagasy, well, not Malagasy families in the whole world, but with indigenous families, shall we say. Yeah, that's where children thrive. So why Madagascar? So what's happening in Madagascar? Well, I stumbled across a report done by some French social workers in partnership with UNICEF and the government in 2011. And the report looked at the situation in Madagascar and said that there was 80, at the time that was 2011, 80 centres or orphanages just in Antananarivo. And if each of those, that's the smallest number, there's probably more like 100. If each of those have 100 children, that's 10,000 children just in the capital city living in institutional care, away from an experience of family. Most of those children in the centres have one living parent, and many have, well, all of them have somewhere, unless they've been abandoned and nobody really knows completely where the family are. They have extended birth family. Many end up, tragically, they end up in care or in centres due to poverty. And little work is done to prevent child abandonment and to stem the flow of children into institutional care. So this was, and part of this report also said the government and UNICEF are committed to try to start family-based foster care in Madagascar. And this was enough for John and I to take our kids. We got on an aeroplane naively and came to Madagascar to see how we could help that effort that the government were wanting to make. Just a little bit about that crisis. The government, as you know, they rely on NGOs to provide social services. And so unless those NGOs are employing Malagasy trained social workers that can really connect with Malagasy communities, that can really understand the root cause of child abandonment, or can really actually embrace poverty and help keep children together, that flow of children unnecessarily into institutional care will keep happening. And here we are in 2021, and all the centres are overcrowded. Children are sharing beds. The judges have run out of places to place children. There really genuinely is a crisis. So when we arrived in 2015, this is some of our team here. But one of the first people we met was this wonderful lady here, Lala Sue, Akaniavuku. I don't know if some of you know Akaniavuku and Lala Sue. You may have heard of this lady. She is the director of an excellent centre called Akaniavuku in the capital city, and we bumped into her by chance. We met her. We explained why we'd come to Madagascar, and she said, "This is wonderful news." She said, "I have 100 children at my centre. They have excellent education. They're well cared for. They're well fed. We do programs and we look after them very, very well, as best we can. But there's one thing I cannot give them, and that is family, and that is individual care, and that is that one-on-one attention that children so desperately crave." And she herself took into her own family 2 children, so she became a foster parent, well, a legal guardian of 2 children that weren't her birth children. And she said the difference between those 2 children and the rest of the children in the centre is so huge in terms of their psychological development and their confidence. And she just said, she's president of our Malagasy NGO, and she is very, very keen to see her children in families. So, wonderful asset, Lalasu. This is, Lantu is our national director. He's a trained social worker at one of the universities in Madagascar. His wife here is Mami. She's with one of our ladies, with our Pregnant Ladies project that we run. We have 5 community workers. These are 2 of them that live very close to our families, because we place families at risk in community, and then we have community workers that work closely with them. And this is our office team, our accountant and our office administrator. There's a few faces of our charity in Madagascar. So we started foster care, and here we are. We're at does anyone recognise this? If you know Akaniavuku, this is Akaniavuku Lalasu's centre, and we had a big recruitment drive, and we spread the word about foster care, and our social workers assessed some applicants, and we had 7 foster families that we trained. They were approved by a local panel of key people in the community, like the mayor, head of police, head of education person, a judge. our social worker did a very thorough assessment on them, and they were approved by a committee that said, yes, these families are great, these families will care for children, these families will love children, they're doing it for the right motives. And we were very, very, very ready to start, and then the government said, stop, wait, don't start yet, we want to start with you, we want to come along with you, and we're not quite ready. So it was very, very frustrating, because this was about 2018. And so we stopped everything. We decided it's the right thing, not just to go ahead, but to work with the government and wait. And the problem was that the law wasn't in place for foster care. So we were in an amazing position where our fostering agency in the UK came alongside us and said, we want to help you in Madagascar, and we want to help the Malagasy government in establishing a national foster care system. And so they're called the Martin James Foundation. They work quite globally, but they're based in the UK. And together with the Martin James Foundation, we were able to be on the committee to approve the foster care law, and we were able to employ a consultant to write it. So we employed the consultant, and we were also involved in the formation of this law, a decree for foster care. I think that's Lantu there, that's our national director there, and we have someone from UNICEF here. And wonderful, it was created, and it is pretty revolutionary. I've just got a copy of it in English here in my glasses. But some of the things that were discussed, and I'll quote a few things from it, but children can now legally live with Malagasy families as long as they don't have more than 3 children living at home. So, and they can be single parents, they can be married, not married, the foster carers. But some of the articles in this law are in respect of the best interest of the child must, as far as possible, reside and be raised in the family of origin. However, if the child cannot be raised by his biological parents, or if these parents abuse the child, and in spite of intervention measures, they can stay with a foster child, with a foster family. And it's in the absence of, so first of all it says birth family must be supported. Child should never be sent to a centre because of poverty. The child must be given the opportunity to live with extended family, and the extended family, the kinship care it's called, should be supported to keep that child as far as possible. If none of those are possible, family-based, a Malagasy family, that's where the child will survive. And during that time in a Malagasy family, if it's possible, to maintain contact with birth family, so that those children grow up knowing their identity, where they're from and who they are, and wherever possible to reunite that child back with birth family as soon as possible, where it's safe, in the best interest of the child. So really just wonderful things. When you know some children grow up in centres and spend their lives in there, and they leave them and they have no idea of identity, they can end up on the street again. We know Malagasy culture, family is everything. If you don't have a family, you haven't got a great future. Family is everything. So this is breakthrough. This was a couple of years now, but I'll let you know where we're up to. We also started to get referrals of families who were on the brink of abandoning their children to orphanages. So centres might contact us and said, we've had somebody's come and wants to give their children away because of poverty. Hospitals would refer families like this. This was one referral. We had a family living on the street with 2 children, a single lady. And what we do is we take the family and we place them in a home in a community, and we support them with not John and I, because we learned very quickly, if you show the Vaza face, it will complicate things very much. So we're behind the scenes, but it's Malagasy social workers and our Malagasy team doing an incredible job of making sure children can stay with their mums when they should do, unless, apart from poverty, is the problem. COVID, so we had about 10 families while we waited for foster care to happen. Then COVID hit, and the was it end of 2019, I think, the COVID crisis happened, and the government's one of their responses was, thankfully, they thought about the homeless families on the street, and they placed them in 2 centres. So, and I think it was about 1,000 people in 2 centres. However, when I say centres, I'm talking about one room, probably twice the size of this room. I will do, yeah. About twice the size of this room. Men, women, children, all in the same room. They were off the street, but they were still in incredible danger, particularly the children and the ladies. We said, 1,000, we have limited funds, but we said we would take the pregnant ladies. We discovered 30 of those ladies living in that centre were pregnant. So we said, we will help by taking the pregnant ladies and their accompanying children and working with them and placing them in safe housing in community. And so 23 families since 2020 are now established in community. 23 babies born, actually 24 because they were twins. This was our first trip from the centre with the 2 pregnant ladies, one here and one here. We took 2 together. They were our first. And the stories that you hear are really quite heartbreaking. I mean, you know, many ladies on the street, some have been there, living there for 10 years. This lady here, she'd been on the street just for 1 year. It was very new for her, but she had escaped an abusive situation and she'd run away. And she was actually, this lady had been on the street for almost a decade and had taken her under her wing, because it's a very frightening place to live on the street. There's a lot of abuse and things like that. They're doing so well now, these ladies. Just life-changing opportunity to live in community for the first time. Here's one of our ladies outside her house. Not the first time she's house, but an opportunity to not be living on the street in a cardboard box with her children, and every single one of them had seriously considered taking their child or their baby to a centre or to an orphanage when they hit crisis. So 23 mums and something like 40 children not in an orphanage but able to live with their mum. This is Johnny, our logistics manager. One time we took a lot of families and a lot of children, and this is mattresses, so mattress delivery for our families. Interestingly, one of the keys that we discovered, not us again, our Malagasy social workers, the key that they discovered for these families lies in paperwork. So many of the homeless families don't have birth certificates, therefore they can't get an ID card, and they can't rent anywhere. So even if they are earning something on the street, they can't get a home because they haven't got birth certificates or ID. So one of the things our social workers do is create that paperwork for them. Even if we can't find a birth certificate, we can work with the government to find ways around it so they can get an ID card, so they can themselves eventually, without us, rent somewhere. A lot of them now have learned to sew, and we find out, what's your dream, what do you want to do? Sell vegetables, sell chickens, do you want to go back to school? They work with them and find out what they can do, what they'd like to do, and we find ways. We have a plan for them for 2 years to get them back on their feet and independent and able to care for their children with a roof over their heads. And it's so exciting, and every single one of them rises to the challenge. I mean, it's difficult at first. When they first arrive, one of the first things we do is the social workers will give them food to last for 3 days. Often that food is eaten right straight away, and we have to say, no, you have to make it last for 3 days. The reason is they live on the street. Whatever they get, they eat, because if they don't eat it, it'll get stolen. You don't store anything if you live on the street. So learning to trust that food will still be there for them in the morning, or to trust that someone's going to come again and give them food. One lady had some children, and the children would wake up in the night and pee next to their beds in the house, because it was just what they were used to. On the street, on a piece of cardboard, get up, pee in the gutter. So our social workers had to say, no, you have to wake up. Oh, I wake up, and you take your child to the latrine. Some simple things like this that simple lessons of how to break a lifetime habit of living on the street to finding dignity and living in community, overcoming a lot of prejudice from the community. So we often don't say that they've come from the street. We let them say when they want to come, and we're just helping people. But because they can face a lot of prejudice from the community. But all of them are so happy now where they are at. They've made friends, they're contributing, and they are doing so well. So, and foster care is still happening. Here we are. This was last week. So we're not quite ready to start our foster care project. We will be next year, but this was last month, not last week. This is Lantu. This is the directors at the Ministry of Population here, and this is a workshop at the Carlton Hotel with key members of the family court judges and the Ministry of Population and the head of police. And we are, with our partners, the Martin James Foundation, we have offered to fund and to help create a handbook on foster care, so that any NGO or any organisation that wants to start foster care has a book, and they know how to start it. They know how to draw people from the community to assess families and to approve families, and using social workers. And this was a workshop last month when they were thrashing out some key issues that will be in the handbook. And believe it or not, these are the UN guidelines on alternative care, written in 2009. And at this workshop, we had to, not me, I wasn't there, I was in my kitchen drinking tea in Christchurch. I keep saying we, but our team, actually I was on the phone and on Zoom with them, but the UN guidelines on alternative care was the first time that the Ministry of Population had seen this. This is really key, and I mean there's about 50 items, but the main things are, number one, supporting birth family to prevent abandonment due to poverty. Very important. Using professionally qualified social workers to make assessments of birth family and foster carers. Very, very important. Not just volunteers, not just Western volunteers going and doing the work, but Malagasy trained social workers that understand the culture, that understand some of the issues that families in crisis have. Providing a family setting for the child with priority given to finding ways to support kinship care first, extended families, and reintegration of a child within birth family when safe to do so. This was all quite revolutionary for last month at the workshop, with how things are going to progress in the future. And I just want to end with this, it's a gold mine. Taisa is a Malagasy tradition looking at Malagasy people, because you will correct me in my pronunciation, but hundreds of years ago, before urbanisation, if a child was in crisis, let's say mum died, dad went to prison, or mum was sick, or that child or children would be looked after by a neighbour or by a friend or by an aunt or an uncle. It was called Taser. So I still can't get the vowels right in Malagasy. Taser. And often it ended up with having quite a bad reputation because some cases of abuse happened, a few cases, which then became well known. But essentially at core, a wonderful solution, a Malagasy solution to a Malagasy problem. And foster care, the key is for our team and for our Malagasy social workers, is that foster care is not a new Western idea. This is going back to originally what would have happened years ago, but creating a safe, formalised, checked Taser system that works with the judges and works with social workers, and every country globally is doing the same thing. You'll find many countries around the world, they had their ancient ways, of their old ways of caring for children within community. What's happened with urbanisation, and maybe the West will come in and build large orphanages, the doors open, the kids come in. It can often, not always, but it can sometimes do more harm than good, because it can sometimes break up families rather than keep them together. So next year, when we finally start our pilot project with the government, alongside them, walking at their pace, we are going to be, it's like digging up the old gold mines, and the gold is Malagasy foster carers, Malagasy Taser families, who will be, in my heart, in my passion, are the answer to Malagasy crisis, child care, child abandonment crisis. So thank you so much for listening to my talk. Have you got any questions or?